But talking about problematic, Rachel Reeves is visiting China. Instead of, I don't know, staying at home and figuring out how to save our economy, which is in tatters, she's going over to glad hand President Xi, and she's looking for growth, apparently. Is she going to find it there? Let's speak to Mark Sabah, Director at the Committee for Freedom in the Hong Kong Foundation and International Affairs Consultant. Mark, thank you so much for coming into the studio. China, what a great ally indeed. We all need China, don't we? What is Rachel Reeves thinking here? Is this about sort of getting stuff so they can meet net zero targets, or is there an argument to be made that China could be the solution?
So I think it would be childish and churlish to say that we should ignore China. China is obviously a massive player in the world and certainly in the economy. The question is, are they our economic savior? And I would say the answer should be absolutely not. And it's not just based on the economy, it's also based on the fact that they're not a trustworthy partner. They break their deals. They have infiltrated the UK. We have spy scandals constantly coming out from China. We have a spy who's been arrested for infiltrating Prince Andrew's inner circle. We have spies in Parliament. We have a man going on trial in February for spying on behalf of the Hong Kong Economic Trade Office. We have all of these things going on constantly, and yet we're running to China to solve our economic problems, instead of finding methods with allies who are better friends to us. And working better with them. Now, I'm not suggesting at all that we shouldn't trade with China or that we shouldn't have manufacturing in China. I'm suggesting that we should stop treating them as some golden goose who will keep laying these eggs that will save us from all of our woes.
It's not the problem, actually, that China for decades now has played a very smart, gradual game. Their modus operandi has been the sort of incremental economic erosion of the West of the world by seizing assets, by using the Belt and Road Initiative to control almost 90% plus, I think, of mineral wealth in the world that's now needed for smart technologies. And not only that, they own about a third of the world debt. I think they have more world debt in their pockets than the OECD group of nations that IMF and the World Bank put together. I mean, they've kind of put themselves in an all-powerful position, and we're sort of going, oh gosh, we've got no choice now.
Well, I think the thing is that, especially since Xi Jinping became chairman of the Chinese Communist Party 10 odd years ago, the power of China has grown exponentially. Now, we made them rich. We gave them all of our money. We sent all of our manufacturing over there, and they are now using all of that for, as you say, economic coercion. They now threaten us economically. Every time something happens that they don't like, they threaten to switch off the tap. They can cut cables in the North Sea, and all we do is send the ship back with a bit of a don't come back. We should have seized that ship, arrested the captain, and so on and on. And this economic coercion is pervasive across Europe now. Originally, Belt and Road was seen as something that happened in Africa or in Asia. It's not. It's right here on our shores. It's right here in the UK. Chinese businesses and Hong Kong businesses own vast swathes of the British economy, industries, water, nuclear power plants, and so on. And again, I repeat, it's not from a nation that we can trust. They repeatedly break our trust. They broke the Sino-British declaration in Hong Kong. 200,000 Hong Kongers had to flee for taking part in pro-democracy protests, and many of them have settled in the UK. There is a British citizen in jail in Hong Kong called Jimmy Lai. He's been there for 4 years. For me, Rachel Reeves should have said, there is no visit until he's out. It's ridiculous. Why are we not standing up for our own citizens abroad instead of running back to China and hoping that they will help us out?
Should we not? Would not the best approach, instead of flying in that direction, be flying in the opposite direction, going to sit down with Trump's team ahead of inauguration and say we need to come up with a comprehensive Western world strategy to counter China? What resources can we share? What can we pool together? Where can we mine? Where can we access the sort of things we need to make the West the bastions of manufacturing once again, to give us the motor to charge forward, rather than constantly having to go to China and say, well, you know, they've got all the resources now, we better let them make it?
I mean, I completely agree. There is clearly a strategy of appeasement going on, and I can't understand why the British, the Germans, the Americans, the Canadians, the Australians can't begin a process of a reduction of reliance. You know, if we're making 100 cars a day, let's make it 90. Let's bring 10 back to the UK. Slowly, reduce that reliance, reduce the money that we're sending over there, bring it back to the UK or to other friendly nations that we can work with and trust on some of the issues and the values that we care about. this constant appeasement, the mega embassy that they want to build in Tower Hamlets in London, the local council has rejected it time and time again. Residents have rejected it. The security services don't want it. Why on earth has Keir Starmer said, I'm going to look at this myself? Absolutely not should there be a mega embassy right in the centre of London.
Is there a real threat that Rachel Reeves, because this isn't, you know, she's talking about growth of the economy and trade. This isn't the Trade Secretary. This is the Chancellor going over. And you kind of think, well, that's not really your mandate. That's not your job. But one could argue, you know, that is the second most senior person in government. Do you think that there's a real risk that she's going to go over to China and make deals that will put us in a Gordian knot of Chinese control for perpetuity? Well,
first of all, she's not going by herself. She's going with a delegation of banks, investment firms, and so on, including people from HSBC, including the head of the Bank of England and so on. And they're clearly there to work out all of these financial deals. They're clearly there because they believe that they can get something out of it, and she's just there leading that delegation. But again, my point is, it's not that there shouldn't be trade deals or investment with China. It's that it should be a little bit on our terms. We always seem to be the ones going, oh, you know, we don't want to upset anyone and we don't want to offend them and so on. Why not? You know, release the British citizen from prison, then yes, let's talk trade. Stop putting bounties on people in the United Kingdom, and yes, let's talk trade. You know, we deny the Taiwanese president a visit to the United Kingdom, but we keep visiting China. It doesn't make sense. Why aren't we investing more of that money in Taiwan, for example? So Rachel Reeves has a job to try and prop up the economy, which is clearly not in a good state. But I think she's sorely, sorely misguided if she thinks that China is going to be our saviour.
Surely this visit also flies in the face of American policy. They are our closest ally. We still have a special relationship. They're still the biggest, most powerful nation on earth. If anyone's going to be able to help solve the China question, it is them. And it seems to me it's something that Donald Trump is hell-bent on doing. And so you wonder why we don't have a more Atlanticist policy.
I mean, I totally agree. I think the rise of authoritarians, the rise of dictatorships, the rise of these countries who are now banding together, Russia, China, Venezuela, Iran, Belarus, Saudi Arabia, they're clubbing together. That little club called BRICS is now becoming a real threat to Western liberal democracies. And I think that instead of thinking that we are in the position where we were 50 years ago or 100 years ago, where they need us, they are quite clearly taking a position that they want to bypass the US, bypass Europe, bypass the United Kingdom. They want to trade amongst themselves using renminbi. They don't want to use dollars or pounds or euros.
Exactly.
And that's a real threat to the West. And I would agree entirely that the Western liberal democracies need to have a cohesive strategy where they stand together and band against these constant attacks on our own values and our own economies.
Why do we seem to have such a problem as well? I mean, I want to use a good example here. So during COVID, I was working with a consortium, an Anglo-American consortium, who were very keen on promoting small modular reactors, pop-up nuclear technology, which would really help us sort of, you know, fight net zero if that's your jam, but reduce reliance on fossil fuels, which frankly now we do have to go to some pretty dodgy regimes cap in hand to ask for their help. But also this is a technology that China would desperately love to have. They want that so much. We have it. We've got the big beast of Rolls-Royce saying we can build this, and yet our own government won't sign an MOU and say, great, we're going to be at the forefront of this. It's like we're waiting for someone else to take the technology from us, take the intellectual property and do it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but that's partly, there's a mentality that we have of always getting the best price, the cheapest price. And so the risk of doing that is that you're going to always go to countries where you don't have workers' rights, human rights, insurance, fixed salaries. So of course China can undercut any country in the world. Of course Saudi Arabia can undercut anybody because, you know, they can pay and charge whatever they want. China can not pay its workers. We had a hearing in Parliament yesterday with the clothing company Shein, where they asked her a very simple question. Do you have cotton from the region of Xinjiang where we have a commitment not to buy cotton from because of slave labour? And she said, I can't answer that.
Of course they do.
Of course they do. And so electric vehicles, solar panels, all these things that we're worried about, of course they can make an electric vehicle for £15,000. They don't have to pay their workers. And if somebody dies on the job, there's no compensation. So I think that we should be trying to bring some of that back and giving those contracts to companies in the UK, even if it costs a little bit more. And maybe the British public could come along on that journey, understanding that, yes, prices may be a little bit higher, but there are bigger factors at play than just the basic price. It means more jobs, it means national security, it means safety for our citizens, it means a little bit of national pride as well. A little bit of we produce this back here in the UK instead of everything being made in a land far, far away where we make them rich and then we have to suffer the consequences when they turn on us.
How healthy is China, though? Because there was a sort of big discussion at one point of there being a big real estate bubble that could blow up at any particular moment. Is China, I think their debt to GDP ratio is far higher than ours, and we're sort of stressing, oh my gosh, it's in tatters, we're going to have to bring back austerity. But China seems to constantly be teetering on the brink of an economic collapse that could frankly collapse global markets.
Well, first of all, China's economy is not as good as it says it is. We know that because several Chinese economists have come to the West and said the numbers are fudged or the numbers aren't real. In fact, one of them made a speech about that just a few weeks ago, and he's now disappeared because he said actually the growth is only about 2%, not 5%, which is what we're being sold. But there's another factor. Who knows what the real figures are? Under the CCP, they can make up whatever numbers they want to show how strong they are. We don't know. There isn't a free press. So you can't have anyone questioning the secretaries. You can't have anyone digging into the results as you can in a Western liberal democracy like the United Kingdom or Germany or France. And so who actually knows the real data? So if Rachel Reeves goes there thinking, oh my God, they've got 5% growth, they're doing so well. Well, do they?
Do they?
How do we know?
Exactly. Mark, thank you ever so much. By the way, brilliant glasses. I care for those greatly.